The hardest thing I had to learn, raising the stakes. I'm Karin with Right Now Editing, where we turn good manuscripts into great books.
And I'm Peg Thomas, multi-award winning author and editor, and we are two editors for 5 minutes.
And today we're going to talk about one of the things I struggled with, which was raising the stakes. I often got comments back from critique partners or contests where they would read my synopsis and they would ask me, well, what are the stakes? Well, what are the stakes? Nowadays, my brain immediately knows what they're talking about. But back then, I wasn't quite sure what they meant by raising the stakes. I'm like, what do you mean what's at stake? Like I write romance. There's nothing really at stake. She's not going to lose anything. But there still has to be stakes. That's something that's at risk. So Peg, when you first heard the phrase raising the stakes, how did you process it? And how did you start to work through what that meant for you as an author, what you had to include in your story?
Well, mine's much easier than yours because I write historical. So I start out with a historical event that is changing people's lives. So mine was a no-brainer.
That Civil War just makes things easy. So for me, it took a while, again, because I think when you're writing a thriller and there's an automatic stake because someone's life is on the line, or maybe there's a business that's going to collapse or a government that's going to collapse. So the stakes are there. But what if you're writing women's fiction or just kind of a contemporary general fiction story or romance? What's at stake? It's usually something a little more personal. You're looking at things like maybe their mental health, maybe they're working through some mental health issues. It could just be, hope. It's more of an abstract than necessarily concrete, but you can also have something that's very concrete because every story, your characters aren't just staring each other in the eyes thinking about how much they love each other. They should have lives. They should work. So maybe a job is at stake or a house. Maybe they're trying to buy a house because they don't want to rent anymore. There's always something that's at stake. But how did you raise those? This is going to be kind of a horrible analogy. And the truth is I've never actually seen the movie. But there is, I believe it's a Ben Stiller movie from either the 90s or the early 2000s called Dodgeball. And it's about these competitive dodgeball players. And to try to encourage these players to improve and to move more quickly, their coach, instead of throwing dodgeballs, throws wrenches at them. So, Peg, you've probably never seen this, have you?
No.
So here's the premise is if you want to improve, if you want to raise the stakes, you need to make it more difficult. So he was trying to make his players better. So he wasn't throwing dodgeballs. He was throwing wrenches at them. And I always stuck with me, throw wrenches at your characters. Don't let their lives be easy. So for Peg, now you might start with, say your characters are, it's the end of the Civil War. Life has changed. But do you is that just the main point of your plot? How do you keep raising the stakes throughout that story?
Well, like I said, I have the advantage of using history. So quite often in my book, Cobalt Skies, in the history of it, there was a cholera outbreak. And that was a great thing to have my character walk into because now we have a life and death situation that came out of nowhere. It's an infectious disease. And back then they didn't know what caused it and they didn't know how to cure it. And a lot of people died from it. And so that was a great thing to throw in front of his path. And I often pick things out of history like that. I'll look up through and I'll say, this year in history, what happened? And I'll look through and see what's going on. And I'll incorporate that as sort of the side tensions that come in and affect my characters, even though it's not part of the main plot. It's still the book I just finished, Freedom's Promise. There's a tornado that goes through. I needed more tension in a place. I needed to demolish something. Grab a tornado. It always works good.
And that's what you do. And sometimes raising the stakes isn't necessarily damage. I just finished reading Cobalt Skies. So Peg kept introducing characters because her main character just wanted to be alone. So people just kept showing up and kept showing up and kept showing up
Right.
and traveling with him. That was raising the stakes. So anything that you can do to make your character, there we go, more miserable and to make life more challenging is raising the stakes. So that's all we've got time for today. Come back next week and we'll talk about some more stuff that we struggled with. Until then, I'm Karin Beery.
And I'm Peg Thomas, and we'll see you next time.